to the development determined by the heredity and the environment. See, when we are dealing with an adolescent boy, when we are dealing with an adolescent child, suddenly that mood swings and a sudden conflict, it is very common, but it also depends on heredity. That means what is the background from which the particular child is coming, or the environment where the child is nurtured. See, parental home environment or the parental history is also very, very, some child comes from a very aggressive family. Some children come from a disturbed domestic environment, so those child, they may show their behavioral changes. See, some child, if they are every time they are scolded in the house, so they show their aggression by fighting. So we have to understand that what is the cause. See, whenever you find a thing happening, every happening has got a cause, so that cause has to be related to the heredity and the environment from which the child is coming. So according to Margaret Mead's that socio-cultural view, you know she believes that no conflict is necessary if culture provides smooth gradual transition. That is what is very necessary, and we need to abide this rule. That means what, when we are handling with the adolescent child or adolescent students in our school, it is not always necessary that we have to scold them or we have to see the aggression, but it is our responsibility. How do we culturally motivate that smooth gradual transition? When we are in school, the smooth gradual transition can be done, and is being done through cultural activities. For example, if you have a crowd of children, maybe if they are left alone in the classroom, only studies will give them a different different thing means that mentally it would be different for the child. But if you allow that child in some cultural activity, for example speech, extempore, or singing, dancing, anything, so that brings not only a change, that not only brings a change in the child, but it culturally curves that energy into a more positive way. Now, development determined by socio-cultural factors, not biological. See, biologically, if you allow an individual just to grow, that is not required in an educated society. See, animals also grow, they have their stages, but human developmental stages and animal developmental stages are entirely different. Why? Because that socio-cultural factor is absent in the animals, but it is there, 100% there in the human developmental phase. So that has to be imbibed, and that has to be utilized in our regular curriculum when we are handling in classroom. Okay, now inventionist view, what do they think is the concept of adolescent is a socio-historical creation, and industrial revolution and the Great Depression, these are the examples in history that showed that how, for example, if we go to the industrial revolution. Now, in that industrial revolution era, we found that great number of scientists, great number of poets, everything, they also came along. Why? Because there was a phase where sudden education and scientific temperament was gone through. It was a sudden outburst of all these. So that socio-cultural thing made into a concept of the children. Okay, so the past and the present. So what was past? See, those teenagers today, the problem with stereotypes, adolescent generalization gap, the adolescent is not a homogeneous group, and the generation gap bias. That means what? Teenagers of today, you cannot stereotype them. I said that they are not all alike. Okay, so that generalization, if you take that all the children are of the same type, you cannot. Okay, now what happens, this adolescent generalization gap, that means what? You cannot generalize them, and they are not homogeneous. That means all the children, we all know that whenever we are taking a class, or if we have a class of 40 children, the class community itself is segregated. Why? Because children coming from different cultural background, different social background, so they have got their different type of reactions. So whenever we are understanding, if that, for example, if we find a child from an affluent family, okay, very rich family like that, so there, you might find that the mood showing and the tantrums are very much there. Why? Because that child is too much pampered, so that socio-cultural thing is not there in a child that coming from a normal background, or some coming from a very educated background. So that culture would be shown in the child. Okay, now, towards a more positive view of adolescence, see what is that? Positive youth development. Now, these are, in the screen, you can see competence, confidence, connection, character, caring, and compassion. So here I would say that here is 5C. That 5C is required for the proper development of a child. Now, can anybody tell me what is competency here? Among the 5Cs, anybody, what is competency? What is competency that we should focus upon? Many of us have done training, on competency based education. So can anybody, ability to do something? Yes. Competency is something that gives the child the capacity to do something. That means what? If the child is good in study, or that singing, anything, even sports. So that competency, the quality within, the ability and the aptitude together can be compiled under the heading of competency. And this is the age where children come out. Okay, so they excel in their best quality. And what is confidence? Confidence is whatever the leadership quality, the entrepreneur quality that is there. Now, the word connection. Now, what is the connection? Connection means how do you relate? That social connections. How do you interact? And here, this is the connections. I would like to tell you that this connection is very, very important, and we need to know that under which category the child is connected. See, connections may be good, may be bad, isn't it? So good connections are definitely necessary, because this is the time, the adolescent, where the energy is at the apex, the climax. So that energy, if diverted in a positive way, will give a positive output. But if this energy is diverted in a negative direction, so there would be an outburst of negative qualities. So this, as parents, as teachers, it is very, very essential for us to see the proper connections of this particular thing. And then character. What is character? Character is what the child wants to be, the individual within. Okay. Then another thing, that has to be inculcated is caring and compassion. A human being without these two habits is called a human being that who does not have compassion or caring attitude in him. In one word, can you tell me what we call him? I repeat again, a human being without the quality of compassion and without the capacity of caring, what is it called? Empathy. Empathy is a quality, again related to compassion. Selfish, not selfish at all. It is not selfish. Yes, anybody with a proper word. I said human being. So anything related to human only. Animal. No, exactly. It's not animal. Inhuman. Somebody said inhuman. Yes, Moshmi. Yes, inhuman is exactly the correct answer, because human beings have have rather they possess the quality of caring and compassion, and this is the need of the hour. You see people fighting, you see the terrorist, you see this everywhere, an agitation, social agitation going on around suddenly, isn't it? Feuds going on. So this is not required in this civilized world, isn't it? But it is the compassion that will prevent the individual. So today's adolescent is tomorrow's citizen. Our country will be in the hands of these adolescents, in whichever part of the world they are. These adolescents are the future citizen. So they need to have, and as adults, we need to inculcate these habits within the children. Now, adolescent culture. Adolescent culture varies geographically, varies from place to place. Now, for example, you see that US. People in US and people around the world, they have got a diversified culture. See, in around the world, there are some places where parents don't take care of their children when they are 14 years of age approx. They are independent. Okay. So those are the countries where they have large number of old age homes also. Because if the adult generation does not take care of these adolescents when they require, they are set free. So obviously, when it's the time for the adolescent children to take care of the adult one, they'll also set them free. So that is somewhere apart in the US culture, but they think it in a different way. Social context is changing, and the social policy is fragmented for adolescent in USA. That means, they are treated as an individual, and, they have to earn their living. If you see, in the US, you find that small children, they distribute papers, they clean ice, and they get money. So that means what? Parents are not entitled or entitled for taking care of those children in the US. But here in India or the rest of the part of the world, children are our responsibility, isn't it? So that way, the global youth culture is different when we compare with the US. So the places which have got rich cultural heritage, these are the, for example, in India, if we see the historical background, this adolescent were in good hands right from the beginning. We had the Gurukul culture. After adolescent, when the child completes that adolescent phase, then the child would return to Grihastha. Grihastha means the manhood stage. So that adolescent culture, so global youth culture is different. So that means what? You give a proper guidance to this adolescent, then many tradition remain constant. So adolescent in different culture have varying experience, obviously. So whenever a society is in a traditional way, they have their own heritage. So there the adolescent community has got their own traditions also. See, some this way, that way may go. Exceptions are always there, but the community is also responsible for curving the culture of the adolescent. Now, how does this development during the adolescent? We have to understand. Okay, so development, what is development? The pattern of change that begins at the conception and continues throughout the lifespan. That means it includes both growth and decay, progress and period. So biologically, it is a very, very defined process, that development. See, growth and development. So development patterns, changes that begins at conception and continues throughout the life. That means the individual would be developing, and that development has been divided into different phases. Now, if we consider this development as a biological part, now how do we do that? See, biological development, physical growth, cognitive and socio-emotional processes, that is also very, very important. See, development is a direct result of the interaction between these three phases. For example, see, it is explained clearly. See, biological growth means the physical changes. You see, for a child child who is in class 5, rather 4, 5, suddenly the child goes to class 6, 7 and 8. So physically, if we observe, the physical changes both in the boys and girls are very prominent. The physique, suddenly the height increases. Okay, then by the time the child comes to 9 and 10, if the boys are there, you see the voice cracking. That means the manhood stage originates from there. Then beard and all those physical external, we all know that how these changes are. Now let me come to focus on the cognitive change. So this cognitive change is in our domain. As teachers, this biological change we cannot handle, because this depends on the parental care. What type of food, what type of nourishment, caring the child is getting at the home. So the physical changes will be entirely related to the biological that side, and that is for the parental section. Now the cognitive one is under our domain, and we need to guide and rather observe the changes in intelligence and thinking. See, there are so many methods. I don't want to go into those critical thinking and brainstorming activities, but we all know, and that boosts up the intelligence, and we observe that. Because as the child increases their grade, when the child comes from grade 8 to grade 9, obviously study material is also enhanced, isn't it? The subject depth is also enhanced. So that means what? The psychological change not only changes with the age group, but the intelligence physically not only changes, the psychological change is also interrelated, and even the intelligence. And the thinking part is also very, very prominent. When they have got the capacity to think independently, and as teachers, we should respect their thinking, that independence thinking, because today's independence thinker are tomorrow's entrepreneurs. You never know who is hidden in your classroom. You have scientists, you have doctors, you have engineers, you have lawyers, you have entrepreneurs, great businessmen. You never know who's the next one. So that is why, as teachers, we should definitely entertain. Now sometimes, as teachers, if we are very much, sometimes we are frustrated with a particular topic, we get irritated when we are asked an off guard question. It is very common with us. Yes or no? Yes or no? Just let me know that sometimes. Yes, obviously it is an experience where many of us have experienced. Now what is the first reaction when you don't want to answer that thing? Our psychological is, since we are at a higher level, we are the teacher, we are the we are the leader, we are their leader, mentor rather. So we sometimes we have the habit of just telling that I will not answer, this is off track. But this shouldn't be done, because nowadays, when the child is equipped with a 21st century skill, here the learner has got a voice and they have got a choice. Mark my words, what I said. When today's child, they are equipped with a 21st century skill, they have got a voice and they have got a choice. They have got plenty of sites where they can have these informations. So we have to motivate them so that they excel in that critical thinking and intelligence. And socio-emotional. Now when we come to that socio-emotional changes in emotion, obviously their emotions are very much precious to them. They are very touchy. Why? Because suddenly that self-consciousness becomes there. The self-identity thing arises when the child is becoming adolescent. So we have to respect that. If you scold a particular child, for example a girl and a boy, their emotional changes may vary. If you scold a boy in front of so many other children, suddenly their aggression may come up. Okay, they may be very aggressive, they may become very rude and give you back answers. But whereas in case of a girl, if you insult that particular girl, she might become very upset, or in other words, she might become aggressive also. So those things we do not want. That socio-emotional changes we have to respect as teachers, and that personality relationship and social context, that we should also come into that. Okay, now what are the, now we have to go through different these developmental processes. What you see, that these are the three basic ones. Okay, developmental changes, they are a result of biological, cognitive, and socio emotional process. Now why, why they are known as process? Why? Because this adolescent definitely is a phase, it is not stagnant. Now, if we see the thinking capacity of a class 10th child and of a 12th child, what would be the difference? What would be, for example, if you have a, for example, any brainstorming activity, or any, if you give them something to do, okay, something to do in the sense you tell them to organize something, what would be the difference between a 10th grader and a 12th grader? Can anybody tell me? I repeat again, that if something is given, okay, any brainstorming activity or anything of that sort is given to a particular child of class 10 and class 12. So what would be the difference in them, in their activity, their organization, anything? Anybody? Yes, I saw somebody somebody mentioned just now. I couldn't read the name by the time it went away. Yes, more creative, exactly. Definitely, the class 12 student will prepare it in much better way. They would be more creative. Why? Because that cognitive process of the thinking skill will be excelled. Yes, the perfection. Class 12 will have more perfection than compared to class 10. Yes, my purpose is solved. All of you understood what I wanted to say regarding the cognitive process. That means what? In a process, you see, the initiation starts when the child is in 7th and 8th, and by the time the child reaches the 18 to 19 years, they are in complete exile, isn't it? See, all of us, if we think, we are all adults today, but when we think of ourselves when we were in class 12, okay, might be our height was also absolutely the same, but since with age we have uh, put on weight, or our physique has changed, but more or less our development was similar to that when we were in class 12, isn't it? So the biological process, by the end the adolescent phase comes to an end, this biological process of growth, biological process of growth ceases, but the development continues. Okay. Now the cognitive process, it is there, but that cognitive process does not end like the biological growth phase when the adolescent phase goes on, because it keeps on excelling. And the socio-emotional process is that the way you nurture the child in the adolescent will bear the fruit as they grow in the adulthood. Okay, so what you teach them, how you treat them in this important phase, they are going to be the same way. The individuals will become the way you nurtured them today. Now, when you are dealing with the adolescent, these things should we should understand these things, that setting in which development occurs, and these settings are influenced. See, whenever a development phase is taking place, we have to see that what are the contexts in which the development happens. That socio-economic, ethic, gender, age, peer group, family, and schools. So definitely they are the background. See, historical background, economical background, the social and cultural factors, these are very, very important. And you cannot avoid these when you are dealing with this adolescent. See, sometime if we face any kind of a problem, okay, we face any kind of a problem. Now, I told you that adolescent psychology is not a homogeneous thing. What is homogeneous? Homogeneous means alike. So the development, see, when we deal, see, every school we have counselors, right? When anything happens, the counselor has to take care of that, isn't it? But whenever the counselor along with the teacher, they have to understand that, for example, two child has fought very badly. It's a very common thing. Class 12 or class 10 or class 12, they have fought very badly. We take for an example. Now, when you are counseling the incident, see, we cannot just punish. Punishment is never a option to handle adolescent. Clear? Now, we have to look into the historical fact. That means the background. What is the history? If the child has gotten history of fighting, so we have to segregate that child, and we would assume that this is a particular habit. He has got into a habit, nothing to do with adolescent. Then economical. See, again, I said that child's economical background is also related. How do they begin? How do they behave? Then social and cultural factors, that is also very, very important. Okay. Now, adolescence, as I was telling, a key task in adolescence is preparing for adulthood. That is always there. The period begins from 10 to 13 and ends between 18 to 22. So that transition from childhood is biological. So adolescent determined, that is there. Transitional from adolescence, adulthood determined by experience and culture. So the next part is emergence of adulthood, and it is also experimentation and exploring. So these are the changes that we have to look into that. Okay, so now it is not always that we understand the adolescent just through these methods. Okay, but what we have to do is see developmental issues, and we need to go through these parts. See, these are the parts we should look into it whenever there is a crisis occurs. I said, when we have any crisis, there are so many factors, so many problematic issues apart from the academics. This part I'm dealing is apart from the academics. If we find any part that is creating problems, for example, a confusion, okay, a fight, anything, or any other problem related to the adolescent, then we have the counselors as well as the class teachers. We can collaborate it together and sort out a permanent problem for it, isn't it? So what is the main role here? Why is counseling so important? Because counseling is important because the energy locked within an adolescent is much higher scale than you can imagine. So that turbulence of energy within, because biologically many things are in turbulence within, the hormonal imbalancement, every activity that we are doing biologically, if we go into it, the anterior pituitary and the hypothalamus gland, that is responsible. So when this adolescent there, the hormones are at the peak, so they cannot control sudden outburst of emotions, everything. So inside everything is unrest. Okay, so this unrest is shown physically outside. So when these type of for example, we have children, sometimes when you are handling these children, you might find a sudden outburst. That means we categorizes that misbehave. The child misbehaved with the teacher, gave back answers that way. So those also have to be curved together in a very positive way, because here again, we don't want aggression. So how do you deal with it? First and foremost, I know every one of you, CBSE has always stressed upon the portfolios. The class teacher should keep a portfolio of all these children. Portfolio means the not only the name, class, roll number, but the marks, the academics. Okay, that means the formative assessment. Okay, the terminal assessment. These all together has to be kept into account, because the developmental phase, all round developmental phase, is also calculated through the portfolios, and we can relate to the portfolios where any crisis happens. Okay, so developmental issues, and the debate is, see, nature versus nurture. So what is nurture? How do you care about the individual? Okay, so nurturing is done by both hands. One part is the teacher and one part is the parents. So how well the child is nurtured? If the child comes from a disturbed family, so obviously his behavior will be entirely different. He would be very difficult to handle in the school. So that way, and if we scold, if we punish that particular child, that turbulence or that unrest or anger and aggression, whatever is within the childhood, will be diverted, and it would burst out like a volcano in some other phase. So society also depends on these adolescent individuals. They are tomorrow's citizen. So that is why that determined by the biological inheritance, I said everything, and the environmental experience. So as teachers, this environmental experience is we who are going to give. See, continuity and discontinuity, what does this means? When we are, see, development phase is obviously a gradual and a continuous one. Suddenly a child cannot become adolescent today and tomorrow the manhood, and third day it's old age. No, development is always in a continuous phase. But when we are dealing with any problem, we have to relate it in the basis of experience, earlier experience and the later experience, and what caused this disturbance. And for that case, I told you that portfolio making is a very, very important thing. Now, see, according to Freud, okay, that psychoanalytic theory, what will happen? See, psychosexual stage is the first stage of development, when you can gender wise, you can a girl and a boy can be easily distinguished. Okay, so development as an unconscious emotional process. See, you cannot judge the development, and development is an overall gross total measurable quantity, but you cannot judge the development on a day-to-day basis, right? Because even if you want and even if you don't want, the development phase will go on, right? But the thing is, see, first and foremost, in adolescent, the individual ID, that personality development, comes first. The identity of that particular child, you can see this personal identity, and you can see if as a teacher you can groom it. It is a well privileged stage for us when we see the children come to this adolescent phase, and suddenly they become very matured adult by the time they pass out from the school. So by the time, we are privileged to nurture in the making of their own identity. So ID is very, very important. Now, every individual, when they come to this adolescent phase, the middle phase, when they come to 9th and 10th, specifically the 11th, that egoistic part comes in the middle. I said earlier also, suddenly if you scold them, they'll feel bad. So that ego, because when that particular child was in class 4 and 5, any amount of scolding in front of the class, he would feel sad. He may cry, but that ego feeling was not there. So egoistic part is also a very, very positive way, but it is we who have to see that how much we are going to fan this ego. Because if this ego changes into super ego, you will not be able to control that particular child. The adolescent will become violent. So that is very, very important for us to go through them. Now, you might have seen that defense mechanism, it is a very, very common thing. Now, for example, you tell them something to do, then suddenly that defense mechanism will ask the child that they will not do anything. Okay, so that is a very, very important thing. So defense mechanism means what? They will simply not listen to you. Okay, that defense mechanism, the defense mechanism is actually what? See, if you tell them something, okay, they will simply say that they have not done. So offense is the best defense is also another very key example of this. So unconscious method the ego uses to distort reality and protect itself from anxiety. Why do the child do that at particular thing? See, unconscious method the ego uses to distort reality and protect itself from anxiety. That means that is a self-defense. Offense is the best defense. And the next point is repression and regression. Now, what is this repression and regression? Either, see, in anxiety, the child will run away from you, or in other words, the child will show the aggression. So that is the thing. Okay. Then, in this theory, the less emphasis on sexual motivation. So these things we will not entertain in schools, because that sexuality will be always there when the adolescent phase comes, but it is our responsibility when we are not supposed to, we won't be motivating that particular phase. Okay. Now, social aspiration, that is the best part where we are going to aspire them. Okay, that means what? We are going to inspire the child, socially inspire the child, so that they become somebody in the near future. So that social aspiration is very, very important, and that would definitely give a positive thinking to the particular child. So what are the cognitive theories? See, according to Piaget theory of cognitive development, because this is the only phase, this is the particular phase we are responsible for. Okay, so with the Piaget theory of cognitive development means it is focused entirely on the thinking skill, on the intelligence, everything. So what is it that comes into it? Individual activity constructs understanding of the world through ongoing process of organizing and adaptation. So what is this? The individual activity constructs understanding of the world through ongoing process of organization and adaptation. That means what? The person, individual has to organize things, and they have to adapt to all the changes that is going through. So organization, or to make sense to the world, organize experience and observation, and adaptation adjust to the new individual development. That means this is the particular area that is our responsibility as teachers, to make sure that we curve and pinpoint these places. So what are the cognitive theories? Again, there are so many thinkers, psychologists who have given their opinion. That socio-cultural theory by Vygotsky. Now, what did he said? He said that emphasize how cultural and social interaction guide cognitive development, and there is no individual stages. Now, for example, a child coming from a very cultural or an affluent social background, obviously the child will be doing something that is related to the cultural background. He or she should not follow. And see, there is no particular stages to it. Information processing theory. Now, what is this information processing theory? Information processing theory again has got no stages. Information process theory again has got no stages, and the individual manipulates, monitor, and strategize about information. See, for example, information processing theory is again, that the learning section, what we provide in the books, what we provide in the theory is also related to the information processing theory. The individual manipulates, monitorize, strategize about the information. That means what? You, for example, you ask the child to write an essay. You give him the topic. So individual will be manipulating, will be monitoring, they will focus on, and then they will strategize about the information and they'll give you. So then we are going to assess the child on this basis, isn't it? So develop a gradual increasing capacity for processing information, allowing one to acquire more complex knowledge and skill. So this, see, develop a gradual increasing capacity for processing information. This we are already doing in our academics. For example, a class 9 book is always, and a class 10th book. Class 10 book is obviously of a much higher standard compared to class 10. 11 is of another higher standard, and 12 is also again of a much higher standard. So that gradual increasing capacity for processing information, that means whatever books and all we are giving, we have to process according to that. So that individual skill will be there in the adolescent. Then allowing one to acquire more complex, obviously the sums and, for example, if we take the subject mathematics, what the child studies in class 6, what the child studies in class 7, and in class 12, it would be entirely different to it. Hope all of you understood that. Now see, social cognitive. See, social cognitive is you learn what you observe. Okay, isn't it? So the behavior, ultimately the final behavior, the behavior is a final outcome, or the self-efficacy is through what you go through. What is the background? See, for example, if you know, if we come out from the domain of the school, if we see so many people there, okay. Now, just looking at the person, you can make out that what is the cultural background of that particular person, even if you don't know. If you don't know the particular person, looking at the particular person, you can easily find out that how this thing is going on. So that is known as the environment, and personal cognitiveness is responsible for the behavioral pattern. Now, 5 environmental system with individuals at the center. See, this part is very, very important. I'll only a few minutes left, so I'll just compile it short. See, we have undergone 5 systems. One is the micro system. Now, what is the micro system? Micro system is the individual background. The individual background, that means we call it as a home. What is the type of upbringing the child is coming from? Then the meso system. Now, meso system is connection between the context. So that means what? Here it is the school. The individual, if we are dealing with the individual, the context, we have the school here, that is known as the meso system. And what is the ecosystem? Ecosystem is actually the outer environment where you put down the civilized individual. That means what? When the child comes out, graduates from school means when the child completes the school degree and it goes to the outside world. So he will carry with him the cultural input what you have given to the child when you had nurtured the child in your environment. Okay, then ultimately the macro system is the entire field, entire cultural field where the individual will live in the future, isn't it? The final environment, the socio environment, is the macro system, and chrono system is the environmental event and the transitions over the life. So that is the final destiny, and he will carry everything with him what you have given, isn't it? So now, where when I was telling that some problems are there that we have to deal. Okay, so those, we the when you are handling problems related to adolescent, here the counselor role of a counselor is very, very important. And the counselor, along with the individual and along with the teachers, they have to analyze. They have to analyze the problem in a very, very scientific method. How do we do that? First, we have to capitalize the problem. We have to collect data on the basis of whatever I had said in the session. Then analyze the data, why this was caused. And finally, a conclusion has to be drawn. So that conclusion will be the ultimate result of how do you do that. Okay, now here is a correlation method. When we are dealing with that, we describe the strength of the relationship between two or more events of character. See, whenever a thing has happened, okay, the what is the correlation efficiency? It can happen in two ways. Either it will give you a negative or it would give a positive output. So what is that? When any problem, for example, a child has misbehaved, okay, so we have to generalize it, whether it is a negative form or in a positive form. What is the outcome of it? And then the size and the number of times the child has done this activity. Okay, then finally you have to form a correlation that why this has happened and it should not happen in the future. So there is some sort of a research, correlation research. Again, it is the department, or it is a duty of the counselor to follow this. Then random assignment and experiment. How did it happen? These are the terms. Now another is this experiential research. See, this experiential research is always very, very important when you are dealing with that, because we need to identify the true cause of this. Okay, so finally, this was the few facts and figures that I tried to share with you when we were dealing with adolescent psychology. Now, I hope this session was helpful to you all.
Thank you, ma'am, for your wonderful session.
Thank you so much, ma'am. And I would like to really thank those participants who were constantly listening and they were active in the chat box. Thank you so much. Okay, so I think we have come to the end of the session. Any question, anybody? If anybody has a question, I'm there to answer. Okay, thank you so much for all your positive feedbacks. And your feedbacks would be very helpful for me in the future session. Thank you so much.